Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn the Page. I am Jen, one of your co-hosts today, and I am joined by my illustrious colleague.
Hi, I'm illustrious, but my name is Jessica.
And we also have an illustrious guest. May I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. I'm Michael. I teach with games and I make games that teach. You can find me at luckoflegends.com, storiesrpg.com. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts. I'm all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I know for a fact that Jessica and I have had such a really fun time exploring your website and all of the games and the content that you've produced, and it's all so much fun. And I'm wondering if you could just start by telling us a little bit about exactly how you fell into this. Like, when did you start combining teaching and gaming and curriculum development? Like, this is such a cool little niche. And like, how did you find it?
It's so funny. It's, people say that. I've just come back from presenting at South by Southwest, and one of the most fun things I got to say was how ridiculous it is to imagine that gaming and teaching are somehow not already the same thing. I think the word gamification, it makes me laugh because school's already a game. It's got points, it's got arbitrary rules that change depending on what room you're in. And the worst part is it's got points that don't matter to players. So it's really a badly designed game. And every time somebody talks about gamification or game-based learning, I start laughing and I'm like, no. You're just talking about game design. You're saying we need to redesign this game because it's bad. But that's something that foolishly I didn't realize for decades. I've been making games since I guess I realized you could do that. I had a conversation with an artist buddy who said, I remember playing Lego Battles on your floor. That was a great game. And I was like, yeah, I really love that game. I made that. And he was like, I thought it was a real game. And I was like, but it was. But I never, and then I've been teaching for decades and I never really brought the two together. I'd been running after school programs. I had lots of kids bugging me to learn how to play role-playing games. And it wasn't really until I was teaching digitally that I started thinking about how could this be a vehicle for greater engagement, real student agency and voice? How could we instead of telling kids what to write, asking them what they wanted to write, encouraging them to create worlds together? And that was the start of something that has become a full-time passion for me. I teach digitally, multiple classes per week. I make play-at-home games so that families can use all these games to encourage literacy and build literacy and writing joy for their kids. And right now I am piloting a classroom approach, which I'm kind of blown away. My playtest teachers have been absolutely floored. They're like, we'll spend all summer training other people how to do this. This is the only way we want to teach now. And I'm like, I don't have the structure yet for helping build that, but I will. I'll get there. So it's been really transformative for me as an educator and as a parent. And I just want to get it into more people's hands.
Yeah, I have to say, I am of a family of gamers. My husband and I started dating and we were both already gamers, and our kids, we really started them during the pandemic. And, there were some benefits that we saw. For instance, their math skills are much better than my husband's and mine were, for instance. And, my kids are natural storytellers. I think a lot of kids are natural storytellers, and it gives them like a place to just sort of focus and channel all of that. Could you tell us a little bit about your games and how it all, how they all sort of encourage all of that?
Sure. So one of the things that's, I think, really important about it's interesting that you said, kids are natural storytellers. I think the hardest part of helping adults use story games to help kids learn academic skills and master academic abilities, it comes down to us having to relearn how to tell stories. We don't want to release control. We're very afraid of kids having the agency and voice we say we want them to have. So we find things like saying, what story do you want to tell? Terrifying. We're like, well, they could say anything. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't You can't ask them to trust you unless you're willing to give them that trust in return. So when I approached game design, part of the reason this came about was when the pandemic hit. I had a weekly game with some local kids and my son, and we were already running a game that I had designed that was made to be less focused on combat, more focused on story, which I think is really important. One of the reasons I think D&D has not made the leap into the classroom is it's not designed for the classroom. It's wonderful for what it is. If you want to play it, that's great, but it's a board game with story laid on top. It is about tactics. It's about combat. It's about very specific kinds of interactions. So when we went online, I sort of looked at what was out there and very quickly realized, yeah, I don't want to run D&D for kids. I don't necessarily think this is the most compelling experience when you're using a tabletop simulator, because you're waiting, 3 hours for your turn. And, there's a lot of rules to master. And especially for a lot of kids, it's not the fun part, right? And I'll be honest, I don't think that the fun part for most adults is really the tabletop piece. I think it's the story. It's the game they make up on top. So we started working with slides, and I built a game around telling good stories. So you begin with character design, and you know what? I'll just show you some of the goodies here. This is all of this is not my art. I don't have the right to this art. This art is just part of the clean deck, and kids modify this slide deck. So building a character is very simple. You grab a character sheet and you get to pick lines about your character. And the key to lines is lines have to be something that makes your character interesting, right? So the lines are all designed to encourage kids to be good storytellers. So we always preface this with, play a character you want to tell a story about. Play a character who's interesting. Are perfect characters interesting? No, they're incredibly boring. So, one of the first things you want to talk about is, what's your downfall? Do you struggle in class? Are you incredibly shy? Are you afraid of authority? And then drive, we also get to talk about, okay, so what pushes your character? And this isn't a goal or a dream. In fact, my playtest teachers had this wonderful, the flip side of this is it's also literary analysis. Kids are now filling out character sheets for all the characters from the books they're reading using quotes from the book. So they're reading Amari and the Night Brothers, and one of the questions posed was, okay, so what's Amari's drive? And they started out with, well, she wants to find her brothers. And then, this is how amazing Tyler and Tom are. Tyler goes, well, but that's an external goal, right? If she found her brothers today, what would be motivating her? What does she really want? And eventually the kids came to, oh, she wants to be seen for herself, not as in comparison to her brothers, not as, a magician or a kid who's black, but as a person. And that's her drive. And they found the quote and they put it in. And now the kids are all clamoring to fill out character sheets for every new character they meet, because they have a framework for analysis that makes sense at an intuitive level. So these lines then get leveraged in dramatic scenes to allow kids to build a dice pool. So if you want to do something risky and it would be fun to roll, this is key. We always talk about, do you want to roll? Would rolling add to the story? As long as rolling would be exciting, and we'd be excited to, trouble might be exciting here. If you failed this, it might actually make the story cooler. So there's a direct connection to building grit and also building an authorial understanding. This isn't a game about winning. This is a game about good storytelling. So sometimes having your characters go through some really rough moments, it's a great thing for the story. It's going to make us all on the edge of our seats. So every scene ends up breaking down into 3 things. And we have some set scenes, and then we have some sort of open scenes that the kids get to write. It starts with a read aloud, which is the hook, usually a visual, and we'll always encourage kids to find visuals online. I've got kids making their own art using Midjourney for both characters and scenes. Then there's a series of questions that allow you to explore the scene. You can ask the teller can ask you can ask each other. And then you get to making a move. And when you make a move, there are some suggestions on kinds of moves you might make to affect the situation, but ultimately what you decide to do is up to you. And you leverage those lines. So example, let's say you want to persuade somebody and you're like, well, I've got on my sheet that I'm an obsessive student, that I'm always trying to be, the top student. So since I'm asking one of my professors, I feel like being the good kid would help me here. All right, that's 1 die. If you can leverage up to 3 dice, you roll, the top die determines what happens. This is a Blades in the Dark mechanic. It's very simple, but it's also intuitive. And the result is the high die. So if you get a 1 to 3, you fail and there's trouble. You get a 4 to 5, you have a triumph, but there's trouble. Something's going on there. And if you get a 6, you get a full triumph. Double 6, you get an extra triumph. And then to help the kids, there's always a special ability. And the special ability is something that allows you to raise the level of success for a certain kind of move once per game. It's your big epic moment. And this all interplays with some other little bits. One of my favorite things is, this is what I'm describing right now is what we call a live session. In between live sessions, kids have lore sessions. You pick a prompt, something you're really excited to write about, and if you write, you get to read aloud in lore sessions. Everybody cheers for you, and then you decide how many story points you want to get. 1 point for not writing very much. 2 points for, okay, you did a little bit. It's a paragraph. It's basic. 3 points are, it's a story. I wrote a story. This is legit. 4 points is, I'm pushing it. Look at me now. And 5 points is, this is my opus. This, like, behold. And kids are great. This is a wonderful, this is part of collaborative culture building. All of the challenges in this game are, of course, collaborative. You have to do them communally. You're fighting to figure things out together. And so as a result, kids really want each other to get story points. And you get all these kids, I'll take 2 story points. And kids will be like, heck no, that's 4. Like, did you see what I wrote? You wrote like 10 times. And then there's challenge points. So story points allow you to buy new lines for your character and new specials. So there's this nice virtuous circle building up. And you can also differentiate. You give challenge points. So you got a kid who's struggling with something boring, like compound complex sentences. You say, all right, tell you what, you've been struggling with those commas and conjunctions. I'll give you this. Ready? Give me at least, a handful, 3, 4 compound complex sentences, bonus point next time. And all of a sudden, that kid who would have died if you gave them a worksheet is pounding away and, really sculpting those sentences, because I got to get those extra points so that I can be the one who, I can buy a reroll if somebody blows it, and then everybody will think I'm the best. So it's this lovely community culture building exercise that ends up creating this amazing culture of academic focused joy. Kids love writing. Kids get really excited about improving their writing, and it's very purposeful. When they write, they're writing for peers. They're not writing for a teacher. They're not writing for parents. Again, we're redesigning the game, right? This is performing academic mastery with a purpose. I want my writing to be cool and clever and funny and engaging and dramatic and all those things, because my peers are going to hear it. It's the same thing that motivates those kids who are athletes, who absolutely will do 2 months of work in a week just so they can play the game on the weekend. They want to play the game because they've gotten the oxytocin and dopamine for being part of that team and performing those skills and being rewarded with a currency that matters. Both self-esteem and peer esteem, feeling part of a collaborative culture. The game of school is rigged badly. All the points go straight to the parent or teacher. There is no joy in scoring well or feeling like you succeeded at something, and no individual pride at, I made this amazing thing that everybody thinks is great, connected to academic skills. And that's a shame. But it's not permanent, it's redesignable. So that's a quick overview. Sorry, I know that was a lot, but there you go.
That's all fantastic. And it's so interesting. And what you just said really connects to something I remember reading on your website. You were just talking about the spirit of collaboration and working together and having like an intrinsic motivation. And you're absolutely right that is the opposite of how school is structured traditionally. And what caught me on your website was that you talked about how the love of learning is more motivating than the fear of failure. And that to me 100%. Is like where this really flies, because like the fear of failure is all caught up in like shame and self-judgment and fear and all these like really negative associations. And it's so easy for kids to come to associate those feelings with learning, and I love that this system just makes it so much easier to be like, no, you're going to learn this and you have there's a point other than like getting a check mark down the line from your teacher.
Oh, kids will absolutely write for hours for their friends and also for the joy of knowing like, oh, I can buy this special for my character. And I don't know. I had this experience at South by. A lot of teachers, South by is full of teachers who are ready for something new, right? So people would be like, this is amazing. And then, they'd be like, but how do you make sure learning is happening while the fun is happening? And I don't know how long it will take us to kill this very antiquated idea, this idea that fun and learning are somehow diametrically opposed to one another. If you've been a classroom teacher for any amount of time, your first job is to make sure the kids want to be there. If the kids want to be there, you can make sure the learning happens. As long as they're excited to be in the room and it's fun to go to school, everything else is gravy. But no one learns in a room where they're miserable. If school is not a safe, happy place where you get the opportunity to do fun stuff and be celebrated and be part of a community, I mean, y'all are librarians, you know this. Libraries and schools are two of the last public institutions where community gets genuinely built and supported. And this is, I don't know, my thing about games is it's like a hack. It's really unfair. Story games in particular, not games in general, story games. The same experience people have when reading a great book, right? When you get transported by a great book, you are the main character. You feel intense empathy. When they're in trouble, your heart's in your throat, right? When you're excited, when something good's happening, like you get that warm fuzzy, right? The book ends and you feel like a friend left. You're like, I need another 1,000 pages. I'm not done with this feeling yet, right? That same experience happens in games. Kids take on the role of their characters, and it's this wonderful combination of, I get to be vulnerable and feel emotionally risky moments where I'm on the edge of my seat and I'm vulnerable. And then everybody else in the room gets to catch me. You don't trust someone until you trust them in a vulnerable moment and find out you can, that they will come through for you. The story games create that experience and they bond people. It's funny, in our South by workshop, we had people taking selfies of their crew because they were playing Luna Uni. They got miniaturized. I love this setting, but they got miniaturized, stuck in a cell in mech suits, and they had to fight off viruses using clever plans. And, people were selfieing with their crews. And, I came by and I was like, did you do this in any of your other sessions? And they were like, no. And those people, when they saw each other in the hall, they were like, hey, they were in an hour and a half. They'd become an actual team. Not any of these false, I'm going to give you roles and a goal that you're not really committed to. And then I'm going to tell you what to do. And you're all going to feel vaguely resentful, including the one kid who does all the work. It's not that. They actually collaborated. They felt vulnerable together and they watched out for each other and had each other's back. And the kind of community it creates is really compelling. As a teacher, you can't do culture building in a better way.
I mean, really, it's just, it's exciting to hear. And I think, it is, I like that you talk about, you're there with the characters. And there is a lot of learning that takes place when you feel,
yes,
when you're not like a passive observer into what's going on. I have to say also, I'm like looking at some of the character sheets, and this right here, the one I'm looking at is something called Stories RPG.
Yeah,
and
that's my game. So we have Starsworn, we have Giga City Guardians, and there's a podcast, so you can play it at home with the coloring book Choose Your Own Adventure piece. And
Nice.
There's also a podcast that has parallel stories about a group of characters you meet as you go through the book.
Cool.
So multiple avenues. Sorry, I got really excited. I never know how to talk about my stuff.
What I like how positive it is. There's I'm excellent at, and there's I can't stand, but then there's also like I can't I stand out because it's very like the language is very good and it's very active language, but it's also very like it's very supportive language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that kids really respond to.
I'm very careful about language. I'm an English language teacher, and words matter. In game design, sometimes people forget how important what I call they think about fluff and crunch, right? Fluff is the language, crunch is the real stuff, right? There are numbers involved. Every word on the page is part of your design. If you are not careful and thoughtful about the world you create, if you are not, do not express and welcome the kind of engagement, encourage, inspire the engagement that you want, you will lose kids. And I'm very, very sincerely devoted to nonviolent game design, to communally focused design that really incentivizes kids to connect with each other, look out for each other, help each other, and make characters where they get to imagine a second self. So when you talk about socio-emotional learning, kids, it's amazing what kids can and will do when they're allowed to play a fictional self. They can experiment with who they'd like to be. They can also experiment with who they're afraid they are. And the wonderful part is it lets them accept those inconsistencies, those irregularities, those unique quirks. We always talk about quirks. So it's quirk, drive, downfall. Your downfall helps you. So the kid who says, I'm over energetic, I can't sit still. Boy, howdy, they're going to leverage that for a die when they're doing something physical later. And that kid who really has trouble focusing suddenly reframes their own inability to focus in certain contexts as what it is, a unique part of what makes them who they are, and an advantage in some situations. It's not something to be criticized or to be ashamed of. It's part of who you are, and it's great. So yeah, that's very intentional in the design. I really love the setting of this particular. I do a lot of school settings. When I do my digital stuff, I have, 12. So there's like punk pantheons where you play young gods who are disrupting the old order. There's should call it Creature Conservation Corps, where you play magical researchers with mythical animal companions who are looking to conserve mythical species who are going extinct. Anyway, I have a whole bunch of these. Kids usually vote for the world, but for Luna Uni, I needed one setting. And I'll be honest, my artist is also a parent of one of my students, and he was like, I want to draw the sci-fi world. And I was like, okay. So Luna Uni, it's in a future where there is peace, sustainability. Everything's real chill. There's no hunger. There's no poverty. The core worlds have figured out how to make life very laid back and sustainable and regenerative. It's all good. And you play the kids who aren't really comfortable taking the job at the local recycling plant. The kids who are doing super science experiments in their basement that, threaten the order of the world, not because you want to cause any trouble, just because you're interested. And these are called loonies. And the loonies are sent to Luna Uni, an entire moon that's been terraformed into the universe's center for radical learning. And it's completely infested with wild, zany characters who are all pushing the envelope in different ways. And they're encouraged to do so. So it's kind of like peaceful punk rock, I guess. You get to explore all sorts of, you do all the stuff the core worlders wouldn't do. The kids have been really funny in the playtest groups. They love it. They're all like, they have chants now and stuff. They're like, it's very like, they're very committed. They're like, yeah, we're all loonies. And yeah, it's a great setting. I'm very fond of it.
I'm really interested in the role that improv plays in all this, like in gaming in general and in learning. 'Cause I think that one of the most useful things about that sort of like improv-y in the moment storytelling is that, like, one, as you said, it's collaborative and you learn how to like kind of break down the dichotomy between like teller and receiver of a story, because you're kind of like doing both together as a team, which is super cool. And it really teaches them that kind of like that yes and spirit that is so essential to improv. And like that's really good for team building and for just like, later on when you're going to have to like, make your ideas compatible with other people's ideas and like not shut everything down and be open-minded. And like there's so much that you get from like just learning how to think on your feet.
Kids know this so much better than adults. If you watch any 2 4-year-olds, they are already playing a story game. We're the slow ones with yes and. We get nervous. We're like, wait a minute, I've already placed too many constraints on my reality. Like, I'm not allowed to say yes and to a lot of things. I have to say, no, that doesn't officially fit the rules of physics. Stop
Yeah.
it. Just say yes. Go for the next thing. Let's go. Kids make up games very naturally together. You put them in a room together. Like, I'm a dragon. Okay, well, I'm also a dragon. Okay, well, what kind of dragon are you? I can shoot acid and I can fly. Okay, well, I make portals. All right, we'll make a portal then. Take me somewhere. They're quick on these things, right? We're the ones who forget. And the key to that is it's the joy, right? When they're in control, this is the thing that's crazy. I think, fun example from education. I've been an English teacher for decades. And let's talk about personal narratives. If I asked you, as a grown, mature human being, please write me a story about your life. I want you to be honest. I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to expose and maturely consider your various vagaries and tendencies, the things that might make you embarrassed. And I want you to write it in a way that's compelling and makes you feel good about yourself. And then I want you to present it to other people in front of a room full of people you haven't connected. No, I'm 43. I don't want to do that. And we start writing there. And that's madness to me. That seems like something, people, well, you write about what you know. Yes, you will always, no matter what you write about what you know. But the key is, are you giving your kids agency to decide when and how they share what's true for them, and when and how they process that with other people when they're comfortable? So by creating fictional selves and creating a fictional world, you give them entire agency to decide when and how they would like to talk about what's important. And kids absolutely get there. They write backstories about their characters, and eventually some kid goes, that story is, my dad's a little like the dad in the story. And you get to have those conversations with kids who would otherwise feel absolutely skewered by this. And, to attach then a grade to writing about yourself, it's a monumental ask for grown folks. And I think, again, much like that dichotomy between fun and learning, which is false and completely invented, there's this idea that fiction and nonfiction have a divide, which is, for anyone who knows anything about books, utterly ridiculous. If you write something down, it's fiction. It's your perception. It's how you processed it. There is no nonfiction. Everything's fiction. The question is how many times you're willing to say yes and to enjoy yourself.
So before we close out, I am curious, what age groups does this work for?
All of them. No, I say that, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've had kids as young as 4 playing my games and loving them. And I've also run games for adults. I actually have a game that Stories RPG evolved from systematically that was designed for adults called Hold Fast Station. That's going to be coming out from Lamp Black and Brimstone, I think, over the summer. And that one, honestly, it's been a team building game for adults. You play asteroid miners in the far edge of space who live in a closed community that's cut off from the rest of the solar system. And the question is, you deal with problems. So there's different cycles you go through: problems with trust on the station, problems with health on the station, and problems with the actual physical nature of the station. And the lesson to be taken is everyone is a normal person, a blue collar person who's working on this station together. You don't have to like each other, but you do have to figure out how to work together, because every life is precious and you need everyone. And it has huge benefits. Like I said, the kind of connections you're able to make and the amount of investment you feel in this fictional world, it absolutely translates to everything else you do. We like each other better when we play together, I guess.
Agreed. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming. We are just so excited about the things you're doing in these games. They honestly do sound very fun for adults to play too. And I think that it just creates a really fun environment where there's no pressure on creating something. And that is
I want to play with my kids
to do.
right now.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want to do. I want to go home and I want to play with my kids.
Do it. I will say this: the most exciting thing for me, I think this is an approach it's been coming for a long time, and its time is starting to finally arrive. People need this after the pandemic. this is socio-emotional learning and academic mastery wrapped into one. We're doing an implementation study right now with the Kickstarter. Next year, we're doing the full year impact study. So if any teachers out there would like to work with me, learn how to do this, work with it, please reach out. You can find me at luckoflegends.com. You can find me at storiesrpg.com. And after next year, this is probably going to be available in lots of classrooms. So please keep in touch.
Yes. Well, I hope you'll come back and consider talking about that with us when that happens. We'd love to have you back in a year.
Please, that would be so good.
Yeah.
Be super excited to do it. Hopefully I'll be at South by again with my co-teachers, because they're going to be the ones talking next time. And I'm going to be the one just nodding in the background.
Good. Very good. I will catch you before before next time.
Would love that. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. It is time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.